Hello. So, uh, this is the second part of my sort of mini series going through my games at my recent congress. This is unsurprisingly the second part, so therefore we will be looking at the second round. Sorry, the photo of me in the corner is a little bigger because I just recorded the last sort of episode of this series in which I'm looking through my last round game from this Congress, and very kindly, my opponent from that game actually came onto the classroom to go through with some of the analysis with me. So you've got that to look forward to when that comes out, when I'm done with editing that and going through that in a few days. So yeah, definitely come back and watch the final game, the joint analysis, and find out how we both do in the tournament. But yeah, I didn't want to leak their chess.com accounts, so I've made the picture of me a bit bigger to censor it. So sorry, you've got to deal with a slightly larger image of me today. So let's have a look through the game. So, as I said, this is my second round game. I'm playing a FM, so a FIDE Master. That means that at some point they have achieved 2300 FIDE rated. They're still 2200 FIDE rated and 2250 plus ECF rated. It's a very, very strong player. And going into the game, I was sort of like psychologically, like I've got the black pieces against a very strong player. Second round of Congress, I managed to pick up the full point in the first round. If you haven't seen the first episode, so I was thinking, going into this game, I'm pretty happy if I can remain solid, and I'll take my chances, of course, if any arrive. But he's a very good player, very, very strong player. So I can't expect too much of myself, and chess played well should be a draw. So I shouldn't overstretch myself, shouldn't play it too much. So, my opponent, I'd done a bit of prep before the game. They played c4, and normally I like the symmetrical English structures with c4, c5. What I was looking at in my prep beforehand is that I'd noticed that if I play c4, c5 immediately, my opponent was going to play knight f3 and play for this, let's say that I go knight c6, just for example, and they were going to probably go for this kind of structure with the immediate opening with d4, and then let's just say for the sake of example, this is probably what I would have played, transposing into a Maroczy structure of the Sicilian dragon. This is of course the same structure that we could have gotten if we'd started with the move 1e4 and we'd played an accelerated dragon, and my opponent had gone for the Maroczy with c4, the Maroczy bind structure. So this is one of the options which I have played before. I have quite a lot of experience in. I wasn't particularly scared of this option, but instead of allowing that, I prefer symmetrical English structures, like pure symmetrical English structures without allowing d4. So I chose to go 1g6. And the point of this move is that I'm going to put a bishop on g7, and that's another piece defending the d4 square. So my opponent, of course, doesn't yet know I'm going to play c5 either, so, or hoping to play c5. So the idea is that when I play c5, I'll suddenly have two pieces defending the d4 square, which makes it much harder for my opponent to get in this pawn break without potentially allowing some lines that they don't have as much experience in or they're not as comfortable with. So my opponent responds with g3. And this I'm very happy to see, because I can now play c5, and this is totally safe, because knight f3, I can simply play bishop g7, and this square's covered. Additionally, they've already committed to g3, which makes the Maroczy structures a little bit less dangerous, I believe. I mean, they're still perfectly reasonable and strong positions for white, but spending 2 tempi on putting this bishop here, it's not the most critical options. It's a totally reasonable position, of course, but it's something I'm a little bit happy with playing, and my opponent agreed that that wasn't as dangerous, so he went for a more classical symmetrical English approach as well. We get bishop g2, bishop g7, and now knight c3, and knight c6. So yeah, again, just putting another piece covering this d4 pawn break, which is one of the main ideas in the symmetrical English. Now, my opponent goes knight f3, so preparing to castle and potentially preparing this d4 idea, but it's really hard given the move order that we've played to get this d4 in effectively. Now I go for d6, and I'd done a little bit of preparation. Sorry, I've already said that, but at this point I was expecting castles. This is the main move in the position, at which point I was thinking I was probably going to play bishop f5 and go into sort of these main lines with like bishop d7 or with queen to d7 or queen to c8 and play for e5, knight e7, bishop e6 and d5 kind of things. Sorry, I've just highlighted a lot of things which is not necessarily what I wanted to highlight, but those are a lot of the main ideas in this line. But then my opponent went d3 instead, and this is of course totally reasonable, and I think that I believe I'm still able to go for these options with bishop f5, or just slightly slower versions with bishop d7, which generally achieves similar things. Yeah, I think bishop f5 is a totally reasonable move, because if you commit to e5, then you're slightly weakening your light squares and potentially slightly blocking in your bishop. But I don't want to go into any of the super main lines, and there's another setup, which I've never played before, but I've looked at the theory a little bit, and I'm aware of the ideas, I'm aware of the setup, so I thought I'd give it a try and just play something solid that isn't particularly critical. And I go for this quite trendy line, which you might have seen at top level if you've been following a lot of those games for a while. I go for this move with e6. And the point is, I've been playing the English for a while. I play the symmetrical, like ultra symmetrical. I don't try and play for d4. Like, rarely, unless my opponent makes a situation where it's like the only move to claim any edge. I rarely play for this d4 move. But the issue with this setup for me, and the idea is I'm going to go knight g7, b6, bishop b7, castles, and it's just really, really solid. And I haven't yet faced this with the white pieces, but it's always made me a little nervous because it just seems super, super solid, and there are no holes, no weaknesses in black's position. And white's going to be able to claim some more space, definitely, but I just don't think that black has any real problems in this structure, and actually I believe that I go on to prove that quite effectively in this game. So, we get bishop to g5, and yet again, I don't think this is a fantastic move by my opponent. I don't think it's a bad move at all, it's totally reasonable, but I want to go knight g7 anyway. And unless you're going to go for something super critical, like knight e4, which I don't think is particularly scary, I was looking at it in the game, I think I have a lot of totally reasonable responses, potentially including just taking on b2. I don't know if that's reasonable, but I was looking at it in the game, and I couldn't find an immediate concrete issue with it. I did seem to be up a pawn, and still have a particularly solid structure, so unless you're going to go for something super critical like this, trying to take advantage of my weakened f6 square, next move, I'm just going to play h6 and this bishop is going to have to move again. And it's not like you've misplaced my knight, this is exactly where my knight wanted to be. I'm interested if this is like a mainline idea. So bishop g5 is quite common here. Black has a very good record in this line though. No, I'm definitely going to be playing this line again. e5's the main move, but yeah, e6. Yeah, bishop g5 is the second most common move, but yeah, just knight g7. Yeah, I'm really interested what's the idea here. Like, I can't find any good reason to sort of give me the time. Maybe the point is that you're gonna go queen c1, and then I don't get to play h6. I mean, I can play h6, but then once the bishop retreats, I'm not able to castle. But I've still, like, I want to play knight f5 and knight d4 at some point, if they allow me to. So, I don't think I'm hugely uncomfortable in that scenario. Maybe that was my opponent's issue, though. Maybe they played queen c1 too slowly and allowed me to castle. Maybe I shouldn't be able to castle in this line. That's interesting. I'll look at it some more. But, yeah, my opponent just chooses to castle, and, yeah, again, queen c1 is potentially critical in that scenario. which I hadn't actually really thought about in the game, because if I go h6, the bishop comes back, I'm then not able to castle because h6 is just hanging. So that's an interesting idea, but my opponent plays it in this move order, which does simply allow me to castle, because they haven't played queen c1 in the right move order. That's a really interesting point that I didn't actually pick up on in the game. But good to know, yeah. So now my opponent goes rook b1, and the point is that they're going to go a3 and b4, and try and take some space on the queen side, but that's completely fine. There's not much I can do about that plan without creating some holes and some weaknesses in my structure, so I'm perfectly comfortable with them doing that. I just play b6, and like I say, I'm putting my bishop on b7, and I'm just, like, countering their bishop on g2. I already think black is totally fine in this structure. I can't find any weaknesses in this position, and if you've been struggling with the English, 100% recommend this line for black. I think it seems really comfortable. I haven't actually looked at this critical idea with queen c1 before. I definitely will need to check that out, but if this is the kind of structure that I'm getting against 2250s and the kind of position, then I'm very happy. My opponent now goes queen c1, and I think it's a totally reasonable move, of course, but I don't know how much the queen wants to be on the c1 square. Like, I just play king h7, and the question is the inclusion of queen d1 and king h7 beneficial to me or my opponent? And I don't see why the queen would want to be on c1. Like, I can't see a reason the king wouldn't want to be on h7, but I don't see how the queen is better on c1 than it was on d1, so I'm really not sure how the inclusion of these moves benefits my opponent. But they now go for their plan with b4, and I can just ignore this, because if they have a take, then I just can recapture, and my structure is totally fine. And if they push, I've already got my bishop on this diagonal, so I don't need to be too, on this diagonal, so I don't need to be too concerned about moving my knight. Potentially I can jump into d4 in those scenarios. It gives them a lot of space, but it also strengthens my d5 pawn break. Of course, my main idea in this structure is to eventually play d5. Or I can also go for e5 and transpose back into some of the other structures, but basically, if I want to do that, just play e5 instead of e6. So, yeah, basically, whenever they overextend on either side, my argument is that I'm going to open up the center, and then there are going to be holes in their position once the position opens up. Because this can be very effective to grab all this space in closed structures, but if I can open up the position, then it can become slightly weakening. So we get, so I just go queen d7, just keeping an extra eye on my bishop so that if they try and push, there are no tricks with this, like everything's just over-defended. LPDO, loose pieces drop off, just keep everything super solid, everything super defended. We get e5, and now I go for this move rook to c8, and this is why I believed that this queen was slightly misplaced on c1, because it just walks into a couple of different ideas. Like, for example, let's say that my opponent wastes a move with the move h3. Now if I want to jump into the center, I totally can, because takes, let's say this knight moves back to try and hit the pawn. Now I can go for this d5 move, and this pawn is just a real target. If they let me take, then I create a passed pawn that's going to be defended, and it's going to be a real pain to deal with in an endgame. And if they take, I can recapture with the pawn and continue to try and apply pressure here. I think that's totally reasonable, but I can also take back with the knight or the bishop. And actually, if I take back with the bishop and trade off their bishop, which is supposed to be their main defender of their king, then all of a sudden things are looking a little bit airy around here. I was very comfortable with that kind of position. Let's say we get takes. I've got more space. We've kind of reached a Benoni type structure where I can play for like e5 and f5, but I've traded off their good Benoni bishop. Of course, it's a reverse Benoni because reverse colors, but I think this is just a very comfortable version of this kind of structure for black. So my opponent did not go for that. They go for rook e1, just to cover any other just to support this pawn, potentially support some kind of push in the future, or push on d4 in the future. Of course, not possible at the moment. Just, yet again, keep everything supported. It's a natural developing move. But this does allow me to just put my knight in the center, and yet again, ideas of takes. I can go d5, and I really, really like my position. I think that looks pretty comfortable. I haven't checked this game with the engine. I mean, I think I might have after the game briefly, but I haven't looked at it thoroughly. I will check my game with the engine just at the end of the video, so stick around for that. But yeah, they choose not to take, and actually they agree with me. They end up shuffling their queen back to get off of this line, and now I don't really necessarily want my pawns to be doubled, or I want the option for them not to be, so I go knight to c6. If they go b5, by the way, I can trade with a check, importantly, so that I can replace my knight, and then I get rid of one of their defenders, and that comes with tempo, and I think that that's very comfortable, if not like, I mean, if not borderline, like a very good position for black. So instead, they're the one that trades first, and now they try and get rid of my strong knight with the move knight back to e2, just applying some pressure. And now I think I find a nice idea. I find one of the other main pawn breaks in the position, this e6 move that I played all that long time ago, supports this d5 pawn push, and this f5 pawn push, which is the move that I end up playing. And the point is, I'm trying to open up this file for my rook, so that if they take, potentially the bishop and the rook are staring at this weak f2 pawn. Additionally, I can trade off their bishop that's supposed to be defending their king, and just structurally I think I'm very solid and more active going into the heavy piece endgame. Because yeah, at this point I calculate what happens in the game. I calculate takes. I think you have to go bishop e3 here, which is what my opponent plays. I can trade off the bishops, their king's a little bit airy, and now I just slide my rook over. I spent a long time considering my options here, actually, because I wasn't totally sure if I wanted to take and sort of maintain my sort of traditionally nice pawn structure before playing rook c to f8, sorry, and trying to apply pressure across the open file. But I actually ended up deciding that this structure after takes was actually probably better for me, and I save a tempo because I'm not the one to capture. The reason I decided that this was better is I just thought I had a really fantastic clamp on the dark squares, and they've got quite sort of weak dark squares. I've got this potential pawn break of d5, I've got this potential pawn break of b5, and the hopes that eventually I can take on c4 and force through a pass pawn. Additionally, it just saves me a tempo and I can apply some pressure, but actually this is just a very balanced position, so I think most things are pretty reasonable. I do decide to go for this move, and we get a trade on d4, and they go rook b2 because they've got to defend the f2 pawn. Now, I go h5, trying to go to h4, create some weaknesses around the king, and they've basically got to go h4 and stop my progress into white's kingside, because if I can create a couple of holes, then that's going to be a real issue. And now, and now I go e5, just solidifying all of my structure, keeping everything very solid, potentially ideas of giving a check and trying to infiltrate on the light squares, or just create, what is it? Is this an Alekine's gun? I can't remember what Hikaru calls it when you've got like all three heavy pieces in a row. But yeah, we get rook to e4 to stop my pawns from making any progress, to try and prevent my pawn breaks, and I create the Alekine's gun, or I think that's what it's called. Now, we get queen e2 from my opponent, because you've just got to defend this pawn again. And now I slide up to e6. And the point of me going to e6 is I'd calculated this variation that if they, let's say that they play some slow move, let's say that we get a4, for example, or a move that does nothing, I was thinking that in this position it might, I wasn't totally going to play it, but I was thinking I might take on f2. And the point of this is that after queen takes, queen takes, rook takes, if we get king takes, then I can infiltrate on the h3 square, and that looks really quite scary for my opponent. If they take back with the rook, potentially I've got ideas of going d5 and trying to break through. I wasn't totally sure what I thought of that position, trading off the two rooks for the pawn and the queen, but I thought it was potentially an interesting idea to consider. If they take back with the rook, then it's not so fantastic. I can't totally remember what I was thinking in the game if they recapture with the rook. But yeah, it was an idea. Additionally, if they take on d5, which looks like it just wins a pawn because I can't take back because queen takes, then I can take on f2, distract the queen, take back with another check, and then once everything's traded off, I can then take back the rook, and I'm simply up a queen for a rook, and that's completely winning. My opponent sees this idea of sacking the rook for the queen and the rook, and I don't know if they are scared of it or they simply don't want to allow it, but they decide to go queen back to e1. The point being that they can now take back with the rook first, and taking would simply lose a rook. So I shuffle my queen back over and recreate sort of like the Alekhine's gun. And the point of this now is that I'm hoping to infiltrate on the f3 square. I'm hoping to place my rook on f3, apply pressure to d3, and then I can shuffle in with my pieces slowly but surely. So they bring their queen back to e2, and they're just covering the f3 square again. I think I can still go rook to f3 in this position. Sorry. But the d3 pawn's defended, so it should be okay. Now, we've repeat moves once, and at this point, I will admit, we shuffle back and forth and we make a draw. This is, I think, a cowardly decision by me. I'm aware that my opponent is a higher rated player than me, and I'm aware that they had the white pieces, and I think, in my head, I'm like, this is good for my tournament situation. I get a draw against the third seed in the event. The second. No, this is the third seed in the event, sorry. And as the 11th seed in the event, that's a reasonable result to get with the black pieces. Additionally, this game had been very quick. We both played very quickly. It'd been a 2-hour game, which doesn't sound like ages, but for those that watched the first video, which does sound like quite a long time for just a game of chess if you don't play a lot of classical. But actually, in a Congress, the time control for this is we both get an hour 50 plus 10 seconds every move. So in theory, these games can go on for 4.5 hours. And actually, if you watched the first video, I did end up having a 4-hour game. So I was a little bit tired from that game as well. And you've got another match coming up in the afternoon at these events. So I think my thinking was, it's a good tournament result. It keeps me in the running, and I get a draw against a very strong player with the black pieces. So I think that was my thinking, but it's a cowardly way to play, because I've got a lot of other options in this position that I can play for. For example, as discussed, potential ideas of just rook f3 and applying more pressure, asking what they're going to do with their position and how they're going to play it. But actually, the engine spotted an idea which I had thought about earlier in the game, but I actually wasn't considering in this position. It's actually a pretty... not obvious, but it's not like... It wouldn't have been a crazy thing for me to spot in the game. I actually have this really nice pawn break with b5. And the point is that if you take or push... Well, basically, you can't take or push because I respond with d5 and I'm trapping your rook. And... I did miss this idea in the game, or I think I probably would have played for this, because it's hard to see how I'm not just doing quite well in this position. And the point is, basically the best move in this position is, I believe, queen e1. And if I take, they've got a weakness now on the c4 square that can potentially be targeted, and I've created a protected pass pawn, and I can walk into the position. This looks very, very comfortable for black. Yeah, I really should have seen this. I really should have gone for this in the game. And yeah, the only reason I didn't is a bit of cowardice and a bit too much respect for my stronger opponent. But you'll have to see how sort of the tournament strategy of taking the draw works out for me long term. But yeah, this was a cowardly decision by me. And I did miss this b5 idea, which of course you can't can't blame me for missing a move, but but the real issue is that I was being cowardly and I wasn't keeping an eye out for these kinds of ideas and plans. So yeah, I really should have played on, but yeah, my second round was quite a quick draw. But if you want a really solid line against the English, which makes it quite easy to get draws and better positions against FIDE Masters rated 22-2300, then absolutely check out this line of the English. I'm gonna go back to the start and just do a quick check with what the engine thinks of my play and how this game went. Yeah, I know that it has no big queries with my opening, and the symmetrical line is totally reasonable. Yes, I mean, the engine says that d3 is like slightly inaccurate and that they should castle, and it is slightly inaccurate and they should castle, but it's still theory, it's totally reasonable. And like, okay, I mean, the fact that the engine is saying black's better is totally ridiculous. I mean, we have a symmetrical position, like basically a symmetrical position, other than I'm a tempo down and I haven't put this knight out. I mean, yeah, no, the engine thing ridiculous. Yeah, actually, the top engine move is e6 in this position. I didn't realize that was actually the top engine move. But yeah, they jump out with this bishop g5 idea. Yeah, which is slightly wrong, so I'm surprised that that keeps on appearing in the database. Knight g7. I'm just really interested by this queen c1 move. So what's the issue with this? I think there isn't really an issue with this. This is totally reasonable, and I guess the point is that you don't castle, but you've wasted too much time, and actually my king is totally safe in the center. And I just played b6 and bishop b7 anyway. Okay, so yeah, I think that this is probably what my opponent should have committed to, because I feel like combining the lines, things get a little weird, but I mean, of course, they still get a totally reasonable position in the game, and maybe this is bad, but yeah, no, I mean, that makes me feel even better about this variation against the English. But yeah, of course, this is not what we get in the game, but good to know that this just gives up too much time. But of course, instead we get castles, h6, the bishop comes back, and we can just castle. Now we get rook to b1, and as you can see, black's already kind of taking over in this position. I think that this is kind of a nonsense evaluation. Like, my position is very comfortable as black here, but I mean, it's a draw. Like, it's an equal, not a draw, but it's an equal position, definitely. And white's not uncomfortable in these lines with a3 and b4. So yeah, we get b6, a3, bishop b7. And yeah, okay, so yeah, queen c1 is slightly wrong, but at the same time, all of these things are kind of totally reasonable. Interestingly, the engine wants me to go for g5, which is, I mean, it's probably, of course, it's totally fine and concrete, but come on, I'm a human. What do you expect me to play? Now we get this b4 move, but yep, just queen d7, keeping everything solid, everything sticking together. And we get this e4 move. And wow, this is actually a big mistake. I can go for the, not a big mistake, no. I mean, this position is still very much in the balance, but black is very comfortable. I've got this f5 move. I can just immediately place my knight in the center. I go rook ac8, which is a bit slow, but totally fine. And we get rook e1. And now, yeah, the engine likes my position a lot. It's very happy for me to start pushing. It wants me to go g5. That's a lot to commit to. But I go for the second best engine move, knight d4, and we get queen back to e1. Yeah, it still wants me to push immediately with this f5 move. I didn't realize how critical this f5 idea was at the time. But good to know for future in this structure. This is, as I said, my first time playing the structure over the board. So it's very nice to know that it's a reliable, comfortable position. But also good to know how to be more critical with it. Play f5 sooner. Good to know. But yeah, I go for the slower option again. And this is totally reasonable still. Knight e2. And now I get f5. I finally play it. I relieve the engine of its frustrations. We get the trade. And the trade. And the trade. Yeah, and this is all totally fine. Rook fc8, takes. And yeah, I've probably lost the super critical advantage I could have had by going f5 earlier, but my position is still totally reasonable. E5. E5 it doesn't love, but actually the position is just very solid at this point. And yeah, the engine wants us to make a draw, but like, the engine says it is a draw, but they don't play it totally critically. They allow this b5 option. But still, it's not a critical advantage, and like I say, if I'd seen it in the game, I would have gone for it, but this is totally reasonable, and it's a balanced position. Like, black is clearly better, I think, but, like, we get to play, we get to take a draw, and we get to conserve our energy for the rest of the event. And yeah, you'll see how that works out for both of us, going on through the event. But yeah, no, so I mean, generally just a very solid structural game. Check out this line against the English if you're struggling for a weapon against the English. This e6 line in the symmetrical is just very solid. And if white goes for all of their normal ideas and normal plans, like this a3, b4 thing, they're just playing a little bit too slowly, and I just love it because black creates absolutely no weaknesses in their structure. Give it a go, yeah, check it out if you're interested. It's a good model game in this line until I am a coward and take the draw. But yeah, I hope you find the game interesting. I hope you enjoyed. There's not anything super critical in this game, but I think it's a very interesting game still, and there's a lot to take away for how to play against stronger players, and still a lot to take away from the opening. But also something just about like mental attitude and fortitude in chess is like don't respect your opponents too much. Like, oh no, I mean as players, like as human beings, of course, yes, always utmost respect for everyone. But as players, everyone makes mistakes. We're all humans. Don't assume that they've played a perfect game and that the best you can get is a draw. Like, don't assume that if you play on, you'll be the one that mess up. Like, just trust yourself. Just play chess. And partially just because you enjoy the game, hopefully, and partially just because, just because why not? Like, my position's totally safe. I shouldn't have any fear of losing this position. I should be very comfortable to play on with most moves. And I need to just also be objective about my position. Like, my position is good. It's totally fine. There's no reason for me to be panicking, no reason for me to be worried at all. So, yeah, I think from a psychological aspect, this is also an interesting game to look at. Just the impact of playing a stronger player. Like, if I was, as you'll see in my next game, I get another balanced endgame, and instead of making a very quick draw, I commit and I apply pressure and I play the game. Like, it's the psychology of playing stronger players and the psychology of having a higher rating as well. It's like, the higher your rating, the more you expect of yourself, and the more I would press in a position like this if I was playing a lower rated player. Like, but you shouldn't. You should have the same attitude against everyone, because you need to be objective. Chess is an objective game, and it's not about the player, it's about the position. And you've got to respect your opponent as a person, but their chess isn't always going to be perfect. Everyone makes mistakes. And yeah, you need to trust yourself to take advantage of them when you can. So I hope that you've enjoyed this video. I hope that you enjoyed the game. Check out this line against the symmetrical English. In the symmetrical English, if you play the symmetrical English, or if you play the English, be aware of this. Look out. Be concerned, and please don't play this against me in classical tournaments. Hope you enjoyed the video. Bye!